Hello, everyone. My name is Lucia. I am a PhD student in the University of Edinburgh School of Informatics. Today, I will talk about unveiling affective symptoms manifested in social media texts. Why do I study social media data? Social media data has rich information about one's daily life. There are many studies using social media data to infer a mental health status. Most of these studies formulate the question as a classification problem. These approaches often focus on achieving a high accuracy score for predicting a binary or a multi-class mental health status. With very high accuracy, can we use this technique for diagnosis? There are many problems in here. First of all, ground truth labels are difficult to obtain. Determining the ground truth of mental health status relies on concerted effort from clinicians and patients. The clinician's expertise is the center of this technology. Second, how do we protect privacy and prevent stigmatization? One's mental health status is a highly sensitive issue. Lots of people are concerned about their data being used by organizations and results in stigmatization. Third, model biases results in bad judgment and potential group harms. The existing models using social media data to infer mental health status all use a dataset that is biased towards people who are more willing to disclose themselves on social media data. Psychologists also worry that the machine predicted mental health status influence their decision-making process in a negative way. Having all these constraints in mind, how can we move forward? We can consider models trained on social media data as human-centered technology that provides extra data sources to clinicians. In my PhD work, I proposed methodologies to map social media signals to symptoms that are associated with vulnerability to develop certain types of mental disorders. This technique does not imply the mental health status of the participants. It aims at identifying individual level patterns as an extra data source for psychologists. First of all, I will talk about why study affective symptoms on social media platform. Then I will explain how do we track affective symptoms from social media texts. Why do I study affective symptoms? We summarize the findings from 72 papers that use social media data to predict depression. The ground truth label from these papers are mainly from self-reported symptom measurement scale. Among all these studies, all of them have explained features and model settings for a reproducible experiment. More than 70% of them have identified features that are important for the prediction. We summarize these features into 5 clusters: personal pronouns, posting time, ego network, emotional words. Each of them reflect a condition that contributes to vulnerability of developing depression. Personal pronoun reflects focus on self. Posting time reflects sleeping disturbance. Ego network, which is replies, likes, followers, followees, these reflects the social activity level of the user. And emotional words, which reflect an affective style of the users. So why my work focus on the affective pattern? The variance of mood and emotion reaction is called affective style. Affective style influence one's risk of developing psychological disorders. For example, the cognitive theory of depression suggests that negative thinking pattern impose greater risk for a person to develop psychological disorders. Existing studies often found average effect over a long time period, usually 1 year, is associated with depression symptoms. Existing studies often found average effect over a long period of time, usually 1 year, is associated with depression symptoms. For example, Participants with more self-reported depressive symptoms use more negative affective words such as sad, cry, hate in their social media text than those with fewer symptoms. Such an approach often ignores the changes in affect, whereas the changing pattern of mood is critical for inferring depressive symptoms. So in study 1, we use the data set, we examine the transition of affect and their relationship. In study 1, we examine the transition of affect and their relationships with personality and well-being. Our research question is, to what extent do changes in the affect of social media posts correlate with users' personality traits and mental well-being? In this study, we use a dataset from My Personality database, which we applied to use for this project back in 2017. There were 70 participants. We selected 70 participants who completed the Center for Epidemiologic Studies Depression Scale, Satisfaction with Life Scale, Big 5 Personality Scale. These users posted at least 20 posts 2 months before they filled out the depression symptom scale. And we collected we selected all their posts posted 1 year before they completed the depression symptom scale. We manually annotated positive and negative affect in 4,000 posts. For each post, we annotate whether it's positive, negative, neutral, or mixed. On days when users didn't post anything, we inserted silence. We count the frequency of affect changing from one state to another. We found these affective changes are associated with personality, dimensions, and well-being. For example, more extroverted participants tend to post positive content continuously, and that more agreeable participants tend to avoid posting negative content, and that more agreeable participants tend to avoid posting negative content. Transition states of affect provide us with a more nuanced view of how affective patterns on social media text reflect mental health status. To further examine whether transition states of affect in social media text are associated with depression symptoms, in study 2, we construct a mood profile using social media text, and we want to see whether the mood profile can be used to infer depressive symptoms. We used the My Personality dataset again. We selected users who completed the depression symptom scales. We also selected posts that were written 1 year before they finished the scale. And we used a dataset that with more than 700 participants and more than 90,000 posts. We further divide the users into high-low symptom groups according to their depressive symptom scale. The cutoff point was 22. There were 2 steps in this paper. Step 1 is to construct a mood profile. We use sentiment as a basic unit to construct mood. Emotions usually last from seconds to minutes, mood lasts for hours to days, so sentiment extracted from social media text is similar to emotions. We have to find a way to transform the sentiment to mood. So how are we going to do that? We define the sentiment in a period of time as mood, and we call this period of time as a time window. Now we use a time window to construct mood representation. There were 3 parameters for each mood representation: time window, the step size of the time window, and whether to use average sentiment or dominant sentiment in a time window to define mood. A mood profile is a combination of several mood representations. Social media data is noisy. How do we know if this mood profile is actually relevant to depressive symptoms? So step 2 is to test the mood profile, using it to predict a depression symptom score. In the first experiment, we use a Gaussian process regression to monitor mood fluctuation. In the Gaussian process regression, we have a parameter called blank scale. The larger the length scale, the fewer fluctuations in the regression line. We find that people with more depressive symptoms show more fluctuations in their mood. In the second experiment, we use a hidden Markov chain model to estimate a binary hidden state for each day. The emission probability from the hidden states tells us how likely a hidden state emits an observed state, which is the mood we define. We use these hidden states to classify whether a user has a high symptom or low symptom. In this table, Y represents the number of days before the user completed the depression scale. X represents how many days they have high symptom states. So we classify the users in such a way. For example, in the last row, we assign users having 6 symptom states in 2 weeks before they completed the depression symptom scale as high symptom. We found such an approach results in high precision but low recall, because both the low symptom users and extremely high symptom users post less. The low symptom users are the majority in the sample, so the mood estimates those tend to post very sparsely as low symptom. This is also one of the reasons why this kind of model cannot be used in diagnosis or screening, because but it's useful to provide extra information to clinicians as long as we know there is such a bias. Finally, we use a logistic regression model to test all the mood representations. We found that adding up a few mood representations is most helpful for predicting depressive symptoms. When studying how mental illness may be reflected in people's social media data, content not written by the user is often ignored because it might not reflect their own emotions. Our research in study 3, we studied the effect in post content not generated by social media users. Our research question is posting quotes associated with levels of depression symptoms? We constructed a rule-based classifier to identify quotes and song lyrics from the post. This classifier passes each post to Google Search API and classifies whether a post is a quote or a lyric according to the similarities between the post and entries returned by the API. This is the classification result. Our classifier achieved a decent accuracy score. So we put all the variables to a regression and to predict the depression symptom levels. We found that participants with elevated depression symptoms tend to post more lyrics, especially lyrics with neutral or mixed sentiment. By analyzing the topics of those lyrics, we found the lyrics center around overwhelming emotions, self-empowerment, and retrospection of a romantic relationship. Here, H and L indicate whether the word comes from a high symptom or low symptom user. Our findings suggest removing quotes, especially lyrics, might be eliminating content that reflects users' mental health conditions. Finally, our conclusions from all these studies is mood derived from social media text is associated with depression symptoms. The representation for the changes of mood is critical for inferring symptoms. Content that is not written by users themselves also reflect their mental health status. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. I also have a YouTube channel to animate my project. If you like to subscribe to my channel, here's the detail. And feel free to ask me any questions. Thank you.